and thank you for the invitation to the conference. I'm going to be talking about the Counter-Jihad challenge that has been growing in Britain. So the old traditional far right in Britain is currently in a fractured state. The previously dominant British National Party, who in 2010 had over 50 councillors, 2 MEPs, and managed to field 338 candidates in that year's election, general election, has now all but disintegrated. They only managed to field 8 candidates in this year's election and currently only have around 500 members. While no other far-right party has appeared to fill the vacuum left by their demise, a new threat has emerged in the form of organised anti-Islamic sentiment, commonly known as the Counter-Jihad movement. In the town of Luton, a demonstration held on the 10th of March 2009 by members of the Islamist group Al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah in protest against British soldiers returning from active service in Iraq sparked off a series of counter-demonstrations by a number of far-right groups. In the aftermath of these often violent demonstrations, members from these groups, as well as a number of football hooligan firms, formed the first significant British counter-jihad organisation, the English Defence League, or EDL, with the aim of forcing the government to get Islamic extremists off the streets. On their website, the EDL described themselves as a human rights organisation who are committed to a campaign of public education to ensure that all aspects of Islam that impact on our society can be debated in an open and honest way. Despite the roots of their organisation lying in violent protests, they have always claimed to be committed to moderate non-violent campaigning, as well as firmly denying any links to racist or far-right groups or individuals. This is perhaps best summarised by their well-known slogan, "Not racist, not violent, just no longer silent." Indeed, the EDL have gone to great lengths to appear as an inclusive, liberal and multicultural organisation, even forming Jewish, LGBT, Sikh and Cypriot divisions. While this may have been a sincere sentiment at the national or leadership level, research has shown that at the rank and file level, members of the EDL are not simply anti-Muslim or overtly racist, but xenophobic and profoundly hostile towards immigration. They are more likely than others in society to expect intercommunal conflict and to believe that violence is justifiable. It has been frequently documented that EDL supporters are also members of more explicitly racial nationalist organisations such as the British National Front or the Infidels. For example, research carried out by the organisation Indie Media showed that around a quarter of the members of the English Defence League in the northeast of Britain were also members of explicitly racist and white power groups. Furthermore, EDL organised rallies often ended in violent clashes with police and counter-demonstrators. While gathering exact data is possible, there is firm evidence to suggest hundreds of EDL members have been arrested for violent crimes since the group's formation. One salient example of this occurred in July 2013, following the shocking murder of British soldier Lee Rigby on the 22nd of May that year by 2 Islamists, when an EDL rally with about 2,000 members descended into disorder and police and protesters clashed. The violence lasted for around 2 hours and resulted in 52 EDL members being imprisoned last year for their involvement in the violence. However, the murder of Lee Rigby has actually been something of a boon to the ailing fortunes of the EDL, who were already in decline by late 2013 when their charismatic leader, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, left, tellingly citing the growing involvement of right-wing extremists as the reason. While in 2011, the think tank Demos had estimated their membership to be around 25 to 35,000 people, around half of whom were actively involved in marches and demonstrations. By 2015, their membership has fallen to the low hundreds, and they currently no longer even maintain a website. As the EDL's fortunes have waned, the counter-jihad movement in Britain seems to have had new life blown into it from their former leader, Yaxley Lennon, who is now in a position of leadership of the British branch of Pegida, I imagine many of you are aware of who Pegida are, but for those of you who don't, they're a German Islamophobic counter-jihad organization, the English version of their acronym standing for Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamification of the West. The Anti-Fascist Monitoring Organisation Hope Not Hate have argued that Yaxley Lennon is the one person who could reverse the fortunes of Britain's far right, due to his name and reputation, his confrontational approach, the ease with which he engages with the media, and because, unlike the traditional far right, he opposes racial nationalism, and furthermore, his focus on the threat of Islamic extremism has wider resonance in society. After an abortive attempt at launching the group in the summer of 2015 by ex-EDL members, Pegida UK was launched properly with the blessings of the German parent group in early 2016. Their only recent events this year have been moderate, peaceful affairs, attracting a much more middle-class crowd than the EDL ever did. The most high-profile one recently was a silent protest held in Birmingham in February of this year, the same weekend that Pegida rallies were held around the world in cities such as Prague, Amsterdam, Dresden, Calais, and Canberra. Unlike many of these other rallies, however, Pegida UK's one passed entirely peacefully, although they only managed to attract around 200 members. The next event, to be held in June of this year, has been titled A Peaceful and Silent Walk Through the Northern Town of Rotherham, which they have tried to bill as a family event. Nevertheless, there has been signs that Pegida UK might well attract exactly the same right-wing extremists that the EDL did. In February of last year, a group of around 20 EDL members violently disrupted an anti-fascist meeting which had been held to organise a counter-demo to a proposed Pegida march in Newcastle. The EDL members shouted abuse at the anti-fascists, stating that the women present should be sterilised. In June 2015, a number of Pegida UK members, along with members of the hardline racist group The Infidels, tried to violently disrupt an event at Hartlepool Mosque, where they were issued with warning by the police and ordered to leave the area. Furthermore, more overtly racist groups like the British National Party and Infidels have made a concerted effort to piggyback off of Pegida UK events. So the examples of the EDL and Pegida UK demonstrate that the counter-jihad movement holds several threats to civil society in Britain, as well as elsewhere in the world, such as Europe, Australia, America. Firstly, just like the older traditional far-right groups, their events are divisive and damaging to community cohesion, and are more often than not a precursor to more serious violence. Furthermore, as a general rule, the groups in the movement do not contest elections, so they're not susceptible to the moderating effect which electioneering can sometimes generate. Secondly, as the International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation has noted, the sensationalist character of the counter-jihad narrative, which includes a paranoid tendency towards conspiracy theory, can act as inspiration for violent terrorist attacks like those carried out by Anders Breivik, who emerged from the counter-jihad's ideological milieu. Another example of this occurred in Britain in June 2008 when a man called Martin Gilliard was sentenced to 16 years in prison after police found a wide assortment of weapons, including nail bombs, in his flat, together with a note that read, "I am sick and tired of hearing nationalists talking of killing Muslims, blowing up mosques and fighting back only to see these acts of resistance fail. The time has come to stop talking and to act." A more recent example is the case of Pavlo Lapshin, a man who was jailed for 40 years in 2013 for the racially motivated murder of Mohammed Salim and for planting bombs at 3 mosques in Birmingham. Thirdly, the genuine rejection of racial nationalism and the claim to be a liberal human rights organisation by a number of the movement's leaders can serve to add a veneer of acceptability to groups who are, in reality, xenophobic extremists. The most successful counter-jihad organisations in Britain have based their front-stage ideology on cultural racism, demanding that Muslims assimilate to a British, i.e. non-Muslim, way of life, rather than calling for their expulsion from the country or for their murder. And finally, there is the threat that their actions will lead to the dynamic of cumulative extremism developing between counter-jihad groups and Muslim communities. Cumulative extremism is a concept which was first coined by the political scientist Roger Eatwell, which he defined as the way in which one form of extremism can feed off and magnify other forms. Put very simply, this is a concern that a tit-for-tat relationship of reciprocal violence will develop between opposing groups or social movements, potentially leading to spirals of violence and community polarization. The formation of the EDL in response to the small Islamist demonstrations has been cited by some scholars as an example of this dynamic. It is at least possible that the actions of the Counter-Jihad movement may contribute to young Muslims feeling more alienated and disenfranchised and thus becoming radicalized. Indeed, the case in June 2013 of 6 English Islamists being arrested while attempting to plant a bomb at an EDL demo adds weight to this theory. In conclusion, it is clear that since its growth from 2009, the counter-jihad movement has become one of the biggest threats to civil society from the far right in Britain as well as elsewhere in the world. Their ability to generate support by tapping into genuinely held concerns over Islamic extremism has proven to be an enduring one, and the concerted efforts of the leadership to vocally embrace liberal democratic values makes it much more difficult for anti-fascists to use their older tactics of tarring them as fascists. There is a dire need for academics, journalists, and anyone else with the ability to highlight the cultural racism at the heart of their rhetoric, and to expose the fact that they are using the language of liberalism for wholly illiberal ends. Thank you very much.